In anticipation of the new league year on March 17th and what will certainly be a very hot NFL free agency market, we're back in the studio. I'm Larra Overton alongside Matt Taylor to discuss those Colts who will be testing the open market, with 15 Colts from the 2020 season set to become unrestricted free agents when that new league year begins. Notably, we're going to start wide receivers because T.Y. Hilton headlines that group offensively.
Yeah, obviously the only wide receiver for the Colts that is an unrestricted free agent is T.Y. Hilton, and certainly one of the greatest Colts of all time. He's third all time in receiving yards, over 9,000 yards for his career, but he is over the age of 30, and he is hitting the free agency waters for the first time. It appears the Colts are going to let him see what's out there on the open market. And kind of a big picture standpoint, the Colts are one of those teams, they don't like to be the team that sets the market on players. So, T.Y. Hilton obviously has done a tremendous amount in his career, but he's a guy that, Larra, I think can still play at a very high level. You look at the first 7 years of his career, he averaged 75 yards per game. The last two, with a different rotating cast of quarterbacks, that number's down to about 50. So it's going to have to make sense in terms of financials on both parties, but obviously Jim Irsay, Frank Reich, and Chris Ballard would love to have him back.
Also a guy who's very well respected in the locker room. He's been a captain. He's certainly a leader within that group. A few notable wide receiver free agents across the NFL: Kenny Golladay, Will Fuller, Juju Smith-Schuster. So a few other names that you're following as we prepare for March 17th and free agency to begin. Looking at defensive end, this is a position where you have seen the Colts make some moves in free agency the last few years. Justin Houston, Danico Autry, Al-Quadin Muhammad, all set to become free agents.
Yeah, those are some big names. You're talking about 17.5 sacks of that trio from last year, and Justin Houston and Danico Autry both over the age of 30. Justin Houston had 8 sacks last year, 19 sacks combined in 2 years in Indianapolis, and he has played at a very high level. In fact, he hasn't missed a game since joining the Colts in free agency. Danico Autry has shown a tremendous amount of flexibility, position flexibility, all up and down the defensive line. He's played inside, he's played outside. He's got 20 sacks in 3 years, but as we know, both guys are over the age of 30, and that's sort of a tricky proposition at that position. And also throw in Al-Quadin Muhammad. He is a very underrated player, in my opinion, a guy that might be capable of a bigger opportunity. He played about 50% of the snaps last year. He's very good against the run. He's a steady guy. But that's going to be a position to watch, because if you look past those guys, on the edge, you've got Kemoko Turay and Ben Banogu, and obviously Turay last year spent most of the season on PUP, kind of rehabbing and still getting over that bad injury from 2019 in October of that year. And then you had Ben Banogu, who played less than 10% of the snaps in 2020. He was inactive for 8 of the last 10. So depth is something you have to watch out there, or watch for at that position in free agency. But the defensive line is a position that Chris Ballard has always been willing to spend more so than other positions in free agency. You go back to Autry and Justin Houston, DeForest Buckner last year, Jonathan Hankins in 2017. So he prioritizes this team inside out, and obviously some of the big money in terms of what Chris Ballard has been willing to spend in free agency has gone to the guys up front.
Investing in the trenches, we know that's something that is certainly a priority. Notable edge rusher free agents, there are some big names that are going to come available: Yannick Ngakoue, Bud Dupree, Shaq Barrett, a few of those who we will be watching across the league at that position. Now, defensive back, this might be the most intriguing conversation when you look at the names who are set to become free agents: Xavier Rhodes, TJ Carey, Taven Wilson, and Malik Hooker. What do you make of those 4 guys testing the open market?
Well, you start with Xavier Rhodes. Had a fantastic season last year, came over to the Colts in a free agency on a prove-it deal, and prove it he did. I mean, he was one of the best corners in the game last year in all of the NFL. Just over 50% completion percentage allowed. His passer rating against was in the low 80s, and to put that in perspective, that's in the neighborhood of guys like Tre'Davious White and Stephon Gilmore, guys that have played at all-pro level, similar to Xavier Rhodes in the past. So it's going to be interesting to see what his stock is on the open market. We all know that the salary cap is going down. That might affect a guy like Xavier Rhodes. And then you brought up Malik Hooker, and unfortunately for Malik, he's kind of hitting free agency at the wrong time for him. Some bad luck has kind of crept up with him with the injury last year. He was in a contract year because the Colts did not pick up his 5th-year option this time last year. had the Achilles injury in week 2. So just really bad timing, and he's still a young player. He's got some upside. He's 24 years old, but he's missed 36 of a possible 64 career games. So that's obviously not ideal heading into free agency. And then T.J. Carey, I thought was very solid for the Colts last year. 1-year deal coming over from Cleveland in free agency. Played inside in sub packages, played outside, especially at the end of the season in place of Rock Yassin. So
a major role on special teams as well.
Exactly. He had that return for a touchdown on a block punt against Tennessee. So he can give you a lot of position flexibility, and his value is pretty high.
Looking at the offensive line, with the retirement of Anthony Costanzo, that certainly leaves the void at left tackle. And then you have to address the depth at that position behind your starting 5, even in addition to replacing Anthony Costanzo. And you look at those free agents, LaRaven Clark, Chaz Green, and Joey Hunt, all of those who are becoming free agents. That position group is certainly going to be something to invest in that will be examined over these next few weeks.
I think you hit the nail right on the head in terms of depth. We all know about Anthony Costanzo retiring at left tackle, but the depth at tackle last year was tested big time. You had between AC and Braden Smith last year, those two combined to miss 7 games. And you're talking about LaRaven Clark, who is a free agent, but he tore his Achilles very late in the season. So even if he does come back in free agency, he's a guy that, it's 2022 might be a lost year for him as he rehabs from that, late season ending injury in 2020. So Chaz Green is a free agent. So I know that the draft is very heavy or very deep at tackle, so the Colts can get an impactful player, whether it's the first round, second round, or fourth round, as we sit here and talk right now. But I would not be surprised to see the Colts go after a tackle for depth to piggyback off what you said in free agency, knowing, the odds are you need 8-9 guys up front during the course of a season.
Certainly going to be an interesting few weeks. March 17th, it's St. Patrick's Day. You get to the beginning of the NCAA tournament, but most importantly around here,
football.
It is the beginning of the new league year. So we will be back to discuss and break down all of the big major off-season moves as we look ahead to the 2021 season.